What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our college football channel. It's time for the Week 7 Playoff Eliminator as we look at the updated playoff picture and the teams that have been eliminated this past weekend, who's still left, who's undefeated. We're going to look at all of that and look at the playoff bracket as it looks like. If the favorites went out, we'll look at what that playoff bracket is going to look like. So we start with the teams that had already been eliminated. These teams are already gone before we even got to week 6 last week. You see, over half the Power 5 teams here, all the Group of 5 teams, the independents, except for BYU, who is actually now eliminated. Let's just go ahead and show you the new eliminations. BYU, they lost. Duke, their second loss. Florida State, Kentucky, LSU, Maryland, Utah, Washington, and Washington State. These teams all eliminated this week. You look through this list and you could a team emerge with 2 losses? Possibly. If Florida State's able to beat Clemson and somehow win the ACC with a pretty tough schedule, perhaps they could get back into this conversation. If Kentucky were to win out, beat Georgia, I think they're still going to have a problem because they need Georgia to lose another game. LSU, they have a tough schedule in the SEC West, but they would need Alabama to lose. Well, actually, they would only need Alabama to lose. They would not need Alabama to lose another game. They would just need to win out because one of their losses did come in the non-conference. So that will be interesting to see if LSU won out. I guess they would have a chance to get back in it. The other teams, though, really no chance at all for them. And it's so unlikely that we're just going to say that these teams are eliminated. And if we need to down the road, we can bring them back from the dead, which we have had to do on occasion. It's rare, but there are times when we'll bring a team back from the dead, and usually when we do, they'll lose right after that, and it was all for nothing. So we'll see how that plays out. Teams just have 1 loss, but they're still alive in the playoff race. Illinois, Kansas, Kansas State, Minnesota, Mississippi State, NC State, North Carolina, Oregon, and Wake Forest. All of these teams do have a loss, but they're definitely still in the running. I really look at that Oregon team, the way they're playing. They are hot right now. Their only loss came in week 1 to a top 3 team in Georgia. So I think they could definitely have an argument if they do win out. Most of these teams would probably make the playoff if they win out. Illinois, I think it's a little iffy. Probably they would get in, though. I mean, you win the Big Ten, you're going to get in. Kansas would maybe need some help. Kansas State as well, being in the Big 12. Minnesota, if they win out, they need a little help. They lost to Purdue. So, all these teams are going to probably need a little bit of help. There are some, though, that do control at least their destiny in their division or control their own destiny to get to their conference championship, like Oregon does. And North Carolina, they're pretty much in control. They are in control. They have no conference losses. So these teams, I mean, if we look through this list, Oregon's the only team that jumps out to me as a team that might actually make it. But they all definitely are still alive if they were to win out. Okay, how about the teams that are unbeaten? We got Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, Oklahoma State, Ole Miss, Penn State, Syracuse, TCU, Tennessee, UCLA, and USC. And yes, I know James Madison and Coastal Carolina are undefeated, but they've already been eliminated. That's why they're not on this graphic. Neither team has a schedule that is going to be tough enough to give them a resume that is good enough for them to have any chance to make the playoffs. So those teams, they're out of it. They have already been eliminated. That's why they're not on this list. And it's crazy. I mean, we're sitting here going into week 7. Some surprises for sure here. UCLA undefeated at this point. Syracuse still undefeated. TCU still undefeated. It's definitely surprising to see this many undefeated teams at this point. Is one of these teams that's not, or it's a surprise team, is one of them going to continue that? Are we going to see Syracuse actually enter into the playoff conversation, or maybe UCLA or TCU? It could happen. It could happen. These teams all have been good so far. Obviously, to stay undefeated, you have to play pretty good football, and all of them have. And then, of course, you've got your teams that are not surprised at all. Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, Oklahoma State. I don't think many people are surprised by them. Watch out for Ole Miss in the SEC, a dark horse team. Penn State's been better than they were expected to be. So this is going to be really interesting to see which of these teams can really emerge. All right, so let's get to the playoff picture now, the playoff bracket, and this is how it would look, again, if the favorites win out. I still think, especially if Bryce Young is in there, Alabama is going to be favored in every game, including an SEC championship game against Georgia. That one is tough to predict what Vegas is going to do. But again, we're just going by if the favorites win out, and I think that Alabama would be favored in that game. I mean, they're favored on the road at Tennessee by a touchdown coming up on Saturday. So, yeah, Alabama there at number 1. Ohio State, they're going to be favored in all their games. That would put them at 2. If Georgia's favored over Alabama, then you could flip Georgia and Alabama. Obviously, Georgia will be favored in all of their regular season games. But either way, 1-3, you can switch them around. But it will be Alabama and Georgia if there are no upsets. So that's the easy part. Top 3, easy if the favorites went out. But what about that number 4 spot? Michigan's going to be favored in every game that they play except for Ohio State. USC will be favored in every game that they play except for Utah on Saturday. So they could lose that game and still win the Pac-12 and have one loss. Clemson will probably be favored in every game that they play. I would be surprised to see them as an underdog. Oklahoma State maybe an underdog in one game. So you're talking about a bunch of one-loss teams. Clemson, the team that I think is most likely to go undefeated out of those 4 teams. So you could maybe put Clemson as the favorite for the number 4 spot, and then right behind them, Michigan, USC, Oklahoma State. That's going to change if Penn State beats Michigan. Penn State will enter into this conversation. If TCU beats Oklahoma State, maybe TCU then enters into this conversation. So that'll be really fun to see, who is that 4th team, assuming the top 3 teams do take care of business. So that's the updated playoff picture, the updated eliminations after week 6. We are headed to week 7 with some massive games. Can't wait to see what we find out about these teams. Tennessee, Alabama, such a big game. Michigan, Penn State, USC, Utah, huge weekend. Give me your thoughts on the playoff picture down in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more here on the SG1 Sports College Football Channel.